Imagine living in a time period where there are hundreds of people being accused and arrested for witchcraft. This is a reality that occurred in American history in Massachusetts in the year 1692. More than 200 people were accused of witchcraft, and even 20 were killed during this time of mass hysteria. Tim Stutter stated in the events and causes of the Salem witch trials that the fear of witches and the devil is what triggered this mass hysteria. So how did this all get started? Well, Rebecca Brooks stated in an article for the Salem witch trials for History of Massachusetts in 2011 that the daughter of the Salem town minister, Elizabeth Betty, began to have random outbursts and violent contortions and screaming as if she was possessed. William Griggs, which is the town doctor at this time, couldn't figure out what was wrong with Elizabeth Betty, and when he couldn't figure out what was wrong, he ultimately resulted that this was probably witchcraft. After Griggs diagnosed bewitchment, the whole town went into a massive witch hunt. And today, modern doctors say that what was happening to Elizabeth Betty was probably suffering from epilepsy, child abuse, mental illness, or even disease from eating infected rye. Many logical solutions other than she was bewitched. If William Griggs had not diagnosed bewitchment, the Salem witch trials may have never gotten started. And Jess Blumberg said in a brief history of the Salem witch trials that the first case was a woman named Bridget Bishop, and she was the first person brought to the court, and she was later executed on June 10th. Soon after Bridget Bishop, there's 30 more people in the same month that were arrested for witchcraft, both men and women. The local jail in Salem soon became full of about 200 accused witches, and some died in jail waiting for trial. There are many tests for guilt in the Salem witch trials that occurred in court, and I'll discuss a few with you today. The most frequent test to determine if they were accused or innocent was a prayer test, spectral evidence, and also eyewitness testimonials. William Cook expressed some of these in the Psychology of the Salem witch trials excitement. There's a superstition that witches were incapable of reciting sections of the Bible. So in court, they gave the accused witches the Bible, and they told them to recite parts of it. And if they made any mistakes or hesitations, they were accused guilty. They were proved guilty if they couldn't recite the Bible, and this was the prayer test. There's also spectral evidence, and this type of evidence is when the accusers said that they had dreams of the witches, that they saw them in their dreams doing witchcraft, and this made them guilty as well. There's also eyewitness testimonies where witnesses could say that they saw the accused witches actually doing witchcraft, and this alone was enough to make them guilty. These guilt tests were not reliable to accuse someone of witchcraft, and the Superior Court of Judiciary replaced the witchcraft court and said that spectral events was no longer allowed. And this is a picture of the courtroom, what a courtroom would look like in the Salem witch trials in 1692. Soon after spectral evidence was no longer allowed, it was the beginning of the end of the Salem witch trials. Because this was inadequate evidence, many deaths occurred during the Salem witch trials. And most of the remaining prisoners were found not guilty, and they were released due to lack of real evidence. Others who were found guilty were forgiven by the governor. In the following May, the governor released the last few prisoners from prison, and this was finally the end of the Salem witch trials. The end of the Salem witch trials was a release to many of the citizens of Salem. The Salem witch trials of 1692 was a very memorable moment and highly significant event in American history, for it told about the fragility that society would go through, the fragility that society is when they're introduced to a threat. And one doctor, which was William Gregg, started this whole mass hysteria, and it killed many people. By the end of the trials, there was 20 people executed and more than 200 arrested. In January 1692, there was a day of fasting in honor of the innocent lives that were taken during these events. And there's also there's a memorial honoring the lives that were taken that was built in Salem in 1692. The Salem witch trials were a very important event that occurred in American history, and I hope that I taught you guys a lot about it today. Thank you.